Welcome to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast. Your chance to learn about the teachings of the Catholic Church on sacred music, both in theory and practice. Through interviews, discussions, and music, your hearts and minds will be lifted up and better understand what it means to sing the praise of His glory. And now, your host, Dr. Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast. Have you ever wanted to host or plan a really great event at your parish or school to introduce people to sacred music, get them singing some chant, learning what the church really teaches about sacred music? If so, today's episode is for you. I talk with the general manager of the Church Music Association of America, Janet Gorbitz, who is a master at organizing the CMAA's annual Sacred Music Colloquium and other events for the CMAA. We discussed the nuts and bolts of planning a really great event. Janet shared her handouts on this topic, and we've got them available for you on our episode page. Go to sacredmusicpodcast.com, click on episodes, and scroll down to this episode, Season 4, Episode 3, and click on the link. And registration is still open for the CMAA's Sacred Music Colloquium, held this year from June 20th to 25th in Hagerstown, Maryland. For more information on the colloquium, go to musicasacra.com and click on Colloquium 22. And this summer at St. Joseph's Seminary, Monday and Wednesday evenings will feature a class that might interest you if you're interested in this topic that we prepared last summer and that was extremely successful and helpful. Parish Sacred Music Program Management. It meets online June 1st to 27th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's designed for musicians and clergy from parishes of any size who are searching for inspiration and ideas as they work to expand or make changes to an existing sacred music program. The course presents best practices from model parishes and programs, covering structures, personnel, budget, recruitment, fundraising, materials, hymnals, instruments, libraries, some aspects of repertoire, etc. The seminar aims to provide resources for parishes to consider how they might develop a program which is faithful to the mind and heart of the church, as well as intimately linked to the nature and structure of the sacred liturgy. To learn more about all of the courses we're offering this summer at St. Joseph's Seminary, please visit www.dunwoody.edu, spelled D-U-N-W-O-O-D-I-E, and click on Dunwoody Music. And now, on to our interview with Janet. I'm so happy today to be joined by my good friend, Janet Gorbitz, who is the general manager of the CMAA, the Church Music Association of America, and she's been in that position since 2014, and I will gladly toot her horn on this regard. She's been doing a great job and keeps so many things together and running smoothly for the Church Music Association of America, and so I'm really delighted to have her on today to talk about precisely how she does that. You know, if you want to plan a sacred music event in your parish or at your school or in your diocese or something, she's got a lot of great tips and tricks that have helped the events of the Church Music Association of America run smoothly, and she's here to share those today. So thanks so much for joining me today, Janet.
So glad you asked me. Thank you.
So a lot of our listeners are interested in organizing or attending training events in sacred music, and you're such a great model of joyful, professional, and generous organization of such events. You've been one of the main forces in organizing the annual Sacred Music Colloquium of the Church Music Association of America for years now. And I'm always struck by your kindness and organization skills in the midst of all the huge number of details that go into an event like that. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about the first sacred music events that you attended and what drew you into a deeper commitment to the events and the organizations running them?
Sure. I was first introduced to the Church Music Association when I attended my first colloquium in 2007 in Washington, D.C. After that experience, I went home and got support and permission from my pastor to plan a workshop at my parish that same Advent season of the same year at the Cathedral of St. John Berchmans in Shreveport, Louisiana. After that, I became a volunteer for the CMAA and assisted with planning the colloquium each year, particularly with regards to planning meals and assisting with general administration as requested. And from there, it's all history.
Indeed. What are some of the other sorts of events that you have planned?
Well, for the CMAA, I've planned the chant intensive courses, the winter sacred music courses, and of course just recently we had our virtual events that we planned during the last 2 years. So all of those, along with the colloquium, have been very, very interesting and fun. And I've also participated in some of the regional things that have gone on throughout the years. In particular, the Southeastern Sacred Music Workshop that's done in the southeastern part of the United States each fall.
Right. Do you know of some other sorts of regional things like that have gone on recently? For example, in Florida, when I was living there, we used to have the Musica Sacra Florida every year. Susan Tracy and I would plan that. And I know there are a number of other events that you've also been involved in. So what are some of the other things going on in the U.S.?
Well, the last 2 years, of course, it has been rather slow for any in-person events. And so I would have to go back a bit farther than that. But I can say that there were some very nice regional events that were held in St. Louis for a number of years when our Vice President Horst Buchholz was involved in that. But other than that, I would say many of them are just small regional events where people might contact me about questions or suggestions for someone to be on faculty or that sort of thing. So primarily I've worked for the CMAA in the past several years.
Right. So I remember in the 90s when I would sometimes go to training events at my parish, and many of them were put on by publishers like Oregon Catholic Press, OCP, and GIA, Gregorian Institute of America. And those events were really helpful at installing the publisher's materials in the hands of the music directors and in the pews. If someone wanted to take a similar approach to encouraging Gregorian chant and sacred polyphony in average parishes, what sorts of events do you think would be helpful at the parish level for its musicians and clergy and even its congregation?
I remember those events too, although I must admit I didn't attend all that many of them. But you're right, it does put music into the hands of the people right at the parish level. I think similar types of workshops for music directors could be offered by a parish with just some basic instruction in singing chant as well as polyphony could be offered, and the CMAA is uniquely positioned to offer that type of, we have people that could be involved in that type of training and could assist with that kind of a project. But the main difference between the CMAA and those publishers is that the materials the CMAA offers is available for free use. And so we would need to focus more on the money that the parishes would save rather than by encouraging them to buy materials from us. And so it would be quite a shift, because I think generally those publishers pay to send people out from their companies to give these workshops with the hope of selling a lot of their materials. And for the CMAA, we are offering everything for free. So it would need a little bit different tack, I would say.
I mean, if you had to summarize it, it's really like an investment in education rather than materials, in a sense, even though, there's a shift in materials, as you point out, but what you're really investing in is the education of people.
Exactly, because the CMAA offers so many things for free use that you could completely eliminate those disposable worship aids that the parishes buy every year and create your own plan and your own worship aids that could be produced locally for much lower cost. So perhaps another possible workshop that would be helpful would be to show parish musicians how to access and use the free materials that are available from the CMAA and other organizations such as Corpus Christi Watershed and others.
Right. I'm actually doing a workshop on that for the New York Archdiocesan Liturgy Office just next week. So it's a great idea.
Wonderful.
I think music directors are so hungry to learn, and so much of that is learning about things that can be beautiful and yet affordable at the parish level, and free is within everybody's budget.
Exactly. And, there's nothing like the traditional music of the church to bring back a parish program at the lowest possible cost. There's no parish that can't afford the materials that we have to offer, because if they have access to a copier and can download PDF files, they're in business.
Right. So let's say that someone wants to plan an event of the type you described. Where do they start? How does one begin planning an event for their parish, and how far in advance should they start planning?
I think it really must begin by thinking about what you want to accomplish. It depends a lot on where your parish is along the spectrum of sacred music. And if you have a lot of support for what you're trying to do, it's a lot easier to get permission, support, and assistance. But to me, the first place to start is with your pastor. It is crucial that you get his support for using parish facilities and perhaps even some financial support from the parish. So for a simple afternoon workshop on a topic like teaching the chanted Mass ordinary, a few weeks' time might be enough to plan something like this, especially if you're thinking of teaching it yourself or someone local will be teaching it. But for a weekend workshop at your parish, I would recommend planning at least 3 months in advance just to save stress on yourself. And that being said, depending upon who you want to present the workshop and their availability, it might be that you need more time than that if the instructor that you're thinking of has a tight schedule. So 3 months, I would say, at least.
Right. So what might the structure of something that works really well in a parish look like? You know, how long is good for the length of such an event, and what kinds of things are included in the schedule?
Well, if you're going beyond something that's just a 2 or 3 hour short workshop at your parish, then probably a weekend type event is the best. And many times that you're going to have attendees not only from your own parish, but from other nearby parishes within your diocese. And when you're thinking about their own responsibilities for their liturgies, it often works well to begin a weekend workshop on Friday and finish up with an afternoon Mass on Saturday. That's a very typical schedule. So you would typically want to include time for chant instruction, perhaps a simple polyphonic motet, and maybe time for a short breakout talk on a suitable topic. Always leave time for coffee and meal breaks interspersed throughout your schedule. You can customize this a lot, of course, depending upon the skill level of your attendees and what you think would benefit them the most.
Right. You know, and especially on that talk aspect, it's so important that people understand the spiritual aspects of what we're doing. It's not just a taste issue or, you know, a music education thing, but it's really about singing prayer and full active worship at the Mass.
Exactly. And when you have people there for a workshop, they're already interested in sacred music and making it beautiful for their liturgies. So it's a great opportunity to educate them a little bit on what really constitutes sacred music as the Church defines it.
Right. You know, in my experience, I've found that the openness of hearts comes especially through addressing these spiritual issues, that sometimes someone might have some kinds of hang-ups against the Church's sacred music for one reason or another. But when you talk about it in terms of prayer and how it affects the spiritual life, you know, there aren't many people hanging around a Catholic parish who aren't interested in prayer and the spiritual life, especially if they're really actively involved in something like the music program.
I agree. That is truly very much the case, I would say.
Also, you know, in my experience, one of the things that I found works well is the incorporation of actual liturgical services into the structure of a weekend workshop. For example, let's say you've got a Friday afternoon through Saturday evening, that maybe on Friday evening you could have a Vespers or a Mass with professional singers or a more experienced choir singing the chant ordinary or propers and ordinary. And maybe on Saturday, the participants could sing for the Saturday Vigil Mass at the parish. Have you seen other sorts of things like that work?
Yes, that works really well in places where there is an experienced choir available to help with something like this for either an evening concert or Vespers or for an evening liturgy. And sometimes people would also include night prayer, say, or parts of the divine office as a part of their workshops, which also gives another aspect to adding music to their prayer life of the Church. So there are so many different things that you could do, and they all really, really help to draw people into the beauty of the sacred music in the Church. So.
And you also mentioned coffee breaks and meals. And in my my estimation, those are like some of the most important things actually at these events, because so much of what church musicians do and, just people who sing in the parish choir too, it's so important to have that social aspect, just for, life in general and support in the faith, but also support in thinking with the church and doing what the church asks for and envisions in the liturgy, right?
Isn't it so true? If you offer a welcoming and friendly and social atmosphere to the people and give them a chance to catch their breath in between sessions and share some experiences and talk with other people that are attending there with them, and a bit of something to eat and drink at the same time, it really, really does help everything go well. Gives people a chance to recharge their batteries, get a little energy to go forth and do some more singing and learning together.
Yeah, I've even noticed that when you ask the broader parish community to invest in a sacred music event by things like preparing the kitchen or setting out, a buffet for lunch or something, people really feel invested in the project, and people who aren't maybe singing in the choir can feel more connected to the music program, and maybe they'll even hear, some of what's going on and help them understand better the Church's sacred music.
It's really true. I remember last fall when I went down to the Southeastern Sacred Music workshop that was held at a parish just north of Atlanta. They had volunteers from the parish doing all sorts of things. They had a women's group that provided the lunches for us, that provided the snacks and the coffee and keeping everything running smoothly. And they even had volunteers at their parish providing their homes for people on the faculty who were from out of town to stay as their guests. So it was really, really lovely, and the parish did have a big investment of their own time and efforts into it.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. Sometimes music directors especially can feel like the whole world is on their shoulders, but there's so many people who are ready to be a part of the partnership that's necessary for having a really lively sacred music program in the parish. And, I think we would do well to invite people to those sorts of generous acts that incorporate them in that program.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes we music people tend to focus on just asking the members of our choir to help, but in fact there are many who in the parish really appreciate the music but may not be singers themselves but would love to help. So there's a whole other avenue of resources that a parish would have.
A question that's kind of related, should a parish charge for an event like this? And if so, how much, and what sorts of supplies and facilities are needed?
Well, if a parish can't afford to underwrite the entire cost of an event, you'll definitely need to ask for a registration fee. And the beautiful thing about hosting such an event at your own parish is that you typically don't have to pay any rental fees for the use of rooms, and you can keep costs much lower than going to a third-party venue. I recommend building a simple budget, calculating all your expected expenses, and estimating the number of attendees and coming up with a way to break even, or pretty close to it. And if you think that the figure you come up with is a little too high for a typical parish singer or director, then you may need to look for a donor who might help you underwrite the cost. Or you may find that parish organizations can help you with catering, volunteering to help with setup, copying, etc. It's really nice if you can keep the price as low as possible. We all know that musicians are not wealthy as typically. And so if you can keep it under $75, that is great. For a typical weekend workshop with about 50 attendees, you'll need a nice large space for instruction and rehearsal, equipped with a piano or keyboard, a whiteboard, and, if available, audio-visual capability for use during instruction. You'll also need a separate space for registration breaks and any meals that you would have.
So what's your experience in terms of charging versus not? I found that charging even a nominal fee like $10 sometimes helps people show up when they might, feel like they registered for something but got busy or something came up, and just even having paid $10 in advance can help them show up, and that your event can really then be successful through people's participation.
I agree wholeheartedly. If people have to pay even just something really nominal, it gives it value in their minds somehow. I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, but especially during the past 2 years of Zoom meetings and the Zoom presentations all over everywhere, the ones that you have to pay something for are the ones that you make darn sure you make.
Right.
And even if it's just a small amount, that's how people are. And so, yes, I would say even just a nominal fee to make sure that it has some value to them mentally is going to help you with better attendance, I would say.
Right. So how can someone who's new to event planning handle the registration and other sorts of nitty-gritty logistics of this thing?
Well, there are lots of free tools available that can make life simpler for you on planning such an event. One of the things that the CMAA used to use in the early years is we used Google Forms, and that way people could just register and give their contact information and any choices that had to be made about an event. They could do it all on a Google form, and that is still an option that's available out there for free for people to use for registration tools. Also, I would say that it will give you a really good idea of the number of people that you can expect, because even if they just register and don't pay, that gives you a number to work with. Now, I would also suggest that most parishes these days do have a parish website, and I would strongly recommend that you use it as much as possible and put plenty of information about the event and what's going to happen, the schedule, locations, all that sort of thing on your parish website so that people can see information about the event and then how to register. And I've also got a small booklet that I prepared, gosh, it's been several years ago now, on just some basics to think about when planning a workshop, and I could certainly make that available if people are interested.
Well, that's great. We could maybe put that on the CMAA's website, musicasacra.com, or we could host that here on the podcast too, as an additional spot. Have you had any experience with something like Eventbrite, or know of any events that have been using that successfully?
You know, that's not something that I have personally used, so I don't have any real experience with it. So I'm sorry, I can't give you any feedback on that. With the past couple of years, we have set up our own website and our own online shop, and that has made registration and detail work very, very easy for us. And I realize that that's not always possible for all parishes, but there are some really, really nice and free plugins that can be used if a parish wants to set up a shop online that didn't used to be available. So even just with a simple WordPress type application, there are a number of plugins to open up a shop that make it a little bit easier than it was before. Okay,
great. So what kinds of things are reasonable for participants to sing if they're completely new to Gregorian chant and sacred polyphony? You know, what would a Saturday vigil mass look like that people wouldn't feel stressed out by having to prepare that and sing that, but they would be able to settle into the education process and then have a nice result singing a parish vigil mass on Saturday afternoon after like a Friday and Saturday sort of thing?
Yes, if you have a group that's going to be completely unfamiliar with Gregorian chant and sacred polyphony, you'll need some time just for explaining how the notation works. So there's less time for learning difficult chants. So for a group of that type, I would say you could focus a lot on learning the Mass Ordinary and use simpler propers for the most part. You could also choose to use vernacular only for those chants so that you aren't trying to teach them Latin pronunciation at the same time as the new music notation. You may want to have a small schola sing one or more advanced chants that they will prepare in advance in order to demonstrate how it can all work together. And that gives a really nice idea of kind of where you're starting out and what you can get to eventually. Some directors also like to use organ accompaniment for the Mass Ordinary, which can really help beginners with tempo, pitch, and also encourages the parishioners to join in at the Mass. One other thing as far as the polyphonic repertory is the CMAA is working on a new publication that we hope will be completed in the fall of this year with a wonderful collection of polyphonic motets that would be suitable for the parish choir. perhaps using one of those more simple motets for the workshop would yield the best result. And as always, there are many, many resources for very simple motets and things available on some of the free online websites, such as CPDL and IMSLP, and those websites are very good for, if you know what you're looking for. Some of the simpler polyphonic motets that you might be able to choose would be very accessible even for a fairly beginning choir.
Right. I think also of a nice collection that Noel Jones has on Sacred Music Library that he makes available to people. It has some great entry-level polyphony on there.
Yes. Are you talking about his Catholic Book of Hymns, or?
No, it's actually called, I believe, Catholic Choir Book, and it's got a bunch of motets and stuff. But yeah, also this Parish Book of Motets that Dr. Aaron James from the Toronto Oratory is putting together is going to be really great, I think, as a publication for the CMAA.
Along with trying to find a simple motet that your choir could use for this, there are a number of other resources out there that are available to help people with this. For example, Corpus Christi Watershed has a wonderful collection of motets, and the nice thing about what they offer over at their website is they do have some practice videos available for people to learn their parts. Maybe even before they would come to the workshop, if they knew that this is the song we're all going to be working on, and here's a practice video, you could even share that in advance and perhaps shorten the learning curve a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I've done that for some workshops before too, where, I actually just host a YouTube playlist or something for the music that we're going to be singing, and I'll sing it and give practice tracks before. So that can help people feel a little bit less intimidated too, if they have that time to invest in practicing. One of the other things that comes to mind is that the priest can really show his support for this in parish life by singing his parts in that Mass. If you have a Mass that is part of an event like this, that he sings all of his parts, and it can reinforce the congregation knowing, their responses. And even things like using incensation that gives a little bit more time for music than you might have on a normal, Saturday evening Mass. I don't know a lot of parishes that are using incense, but doing it up in that way shows a sort of investment of the parish and the pastor in the sacred music program and what's going on at that workshop.
Oh, I agree so much. And aside from the fact that, it really adds to this particular liturgy, when you have a pastor that's singing his parts on a regular basis and you hear all of the congregation answering back in song and with your spirit, it's a beautiful thing. And so it can add to all parish liturgies in my mind if the pastor begins that, and especially does it at a workshop such as this.
Right. So where do you advertise this sort of stuff, and how do you make sure people will actually show up?
That's great. Yes. The CMAA is always happy to help get the word out on our own social media websites, including Chant Cafe and musicofsoccer.com. And we encourage you to make use of your own parish social media if you have it, and your own website, any bulletin announcements that you have for your parish. Sometimes people have gone to their diocesan newspaper and had good success in getting an article written in, as long as you plan ahead and speak with the people in time, that can be a real boon to bringing in people that may not have even known about it otherwise. So coordinating with diocesan music personnel can really help you to get the word out to people in your region. Now, as far as how do you make sure people show up, I always think prepayment really helps in making sure people actually show up, as we discussed before. If they've invested a little something in it, then they are more likely to make sure that they come. So if you can accept credit cards somehow, or if you can encourage them to send checks, that will help reduce the number of no-shows. Sometimes if you even offer a discount for prepayment, that might be another way to encourage them to do that, actually. If you say, it's going to be $25 at the door or $20 if you pay in advance.
Right.
That's a great way to encourage that. As far as making sure that people just don't forget at the last minute, good communication is really essential. You can send out emails to remind people, create yourself an email list with all of the participants that have registered, and sending out reminders and giving them detailed information about where to register, where to park, what to wear, what the schedule is going to be. It'll help it stay in the front of their mind so they don't just forget about it.
And that brings up another question in my mind. We're kind of targeting this towards the musicians that are already in your music program and singing at your choir. And you've talked a little bit about, bringing together maybe a couple of parishes in the town to do this sort of thing or in the region. But, do you want to focus just on the people already involved in the music program, or is this a way of inviting new people to join your program too?
I would say that it would be a great way to recruit if you make it clear that you don't have to already be involved in the choir in order to sign up for it. And some of those shorter 2 or 3 hour afternoon workshops are a great way to identify potential talent from your own parish by saying, okay, we're going to be learning the Missal chant ordinary. It won't take long. We will serve you some snacks and coffee. It'll be a great chance to meet with your fellow parishioners, so come this afternoon. And sometimes you have people come out of the woodwork that are great singers and just weren't really aware of what you were doing or whether it would be a good fit for them. So yeah, these workshops can really help, I would say, in recruiting new choir members as well. So do you have any final bits of advice? Because you just have so much experience doing this that, is there any last minute sorts of additions you would make to what you've already said? I would say that trying to remember why we do what we do helps to keep the right focus and the joy in what we're trying to accomplish. Each time one of us introduces another person to the beauty of sacred music and the liturgy, we plant a seed. And sometimes it'll bear fruit long after the planting, and we won't know how it impacts others along the road. So we have to imagine that great things can come after modest beginnings, and keep encouraging and assisting and loving others as we do our work, because after all, what we're trying to do is offer lovely music in the worship of God. So that's the focus of where we need to keep everything, I would say. That's great. And you're such a great model of that, Janet. And so thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts about this. And we'll put all those materials that we mentioned up on our podcast website and in the show notes so that people can access them. And can you remind us of the CMAA's URLs? Where can they access our blog and website? Yes. Our main website, where you'll find all the detailed information about our upcoming events, our resources, our online forum, and all the other things about the CMAA, including our history, etc., you would find at our website, which is musicasacra.com. And from there, you can find everything else. And we also have another website called chantcafe.com. And that is a place where musicians blog about, things happening in the sacred music world. And actually, one other addendum that's very important to this, could you mention what's going on this summer with the CMAA colloquium and summer courses? Absolutely. We are so excited that for the first time in a couple of years, we're going to be singing in person together again. The 14th through the 18th of June, we will be having our summer courses where we will have a vocal training intensive course. It's a new course for the CMAA, and it will be taught by Dr. Mie Cecilia Nam, and she is a fantastic teacher. And so choir directors, choir members, people that just want to learn how to take care of their voices, that's a great course for them. We'll also have 2 courses that are being offered by Clear Creek Abbey this year. There is a course that has been taught a couple of times before the pandemic, Laus in Ecclesia, Level 1. And for the first time this year, they will also offer Level 1, and Father Mark Bachman, who is the choir master at Clear Creek, will be offering Level 2 as well. So these all happen the 14th through the 18th of June in Hagerstown, Maryland. And then the following week, we have our annual Sacred Music Colloquium, and that starts the 20th of June, and it goes until Saturday the 25th. And we have wonderful faculty, a beautiful schedule, and wonderful repertory. And we'll be sharing liturgies every day. So I would encourage everyone to come on out and join in with us again and get a chance to collaborate and get to see your friends and other musicians that are working toward the same goals. I think you'd really enjoy it.
And it's such a great event just to bring together people who are brand new to sacred music, as well as people who have massive amount of experience in sacred music and are the highest level professionals. It's such a great combination and a really unique event in that regard.
Yes, and it's something that sometimes when we've been doing this for a while, as I said, my first colloquium was in 2007, but we forget the impact that first liturgy that you attend at a colloquium can have on you. I had never been to a Mass where the music was so lovely ever in my life, and I was a little bit annoyed, if I have to be honest, that I had gone my entire life never knowing about that music up until that point. So it gives you a whole new idea in your mind about what it can be like. And even if you can't achieve that the first year or even a couple of years after you try implementing it at your home parish, it gives you something in your mind to aim for. So I would say it's really important.
That's great. Thank you again so much, Janet. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and we're really grateful for everything that you shared with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Square Notes, the Sacred Music Podcast with Dr. Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka. For more information about this episode, sacred music resources, or upcoming events, visit our website at sacredmusicpodcast.com. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. If you enjoy our podcast, please write us a review on iTunes. This improves our iTunes ranking and helps others find out about the podcast. The music you heard at the beginning of this episode is Hec Dies by William Byrd, sung by the London Oratory Schola Cantorum Boys Choir, directed by Charles Cole from the CD Sacred Treasures of England. The music at the conclusion of this podcast is from the Prelude and Fugue in G Major, BWV 550 by Johann Sebastian Bach, performed by Jennifer Donaldson-Nowicka. We look forward to having you join us next time, and until then, may we sing the praise of His glory.